Um, just a clarification on the Dana link through the Inside Dialogue website. The link will take you to the Teacher Dana page. And if you scroll down the list of teachers, about third from the bottom, you'll find Kalyanamita Yatra. So you can make the donation there. There are a number of teachers and support people who are involved in this whole journey. And we'd like to share the Dana amongst all of us rather than people putting it in individual teacher names. And yes, Dana is very important. We have a lot of young teachers just starting to offer, and we really want to support them. There are people who do need livelihood support. Old guys who are retired like me have less need, but the younger people, if we don't support them, they won't be there in the future to teach. So it's really important to do that. Pausing. Let's begin with a little bit of practice. So just a 10-minute guided meditation, just to let the mind settle, let the body settle. So just find your seat on the chair, on the cushion. Just settle in. Just feeling into that connection between the body and the earth. Feeling the weight of the body on the cushion, on the chair. Maybe a couple of deep breaths. Allowing the body to expand on the in-breath. And release and relax on the out-breath. Just allowing mindfulness of body to establish itself around that contact point. Feeling the support of the earth, the spine, upright and relaxed. Allowing it to support the whole of the body. Allowing the body to soften, perhaps the shoulders to drop. Just checking into where the hands are, maybe releasing the hands. Softening the face. So beginning with a body scan. Just moving out from that point of contact with the earth. Down through the legs. Up through the trunk. Through the shoulders. The neck. Into the face. Down the arms into the hands. Just noticing where there's ease, where there's relaxation. Noticing where there's any tightness, any tension. And if it's simply a matter of just releasing that tightness, then just allowing it to release. And where it doesn't release easily, simply receiving, accepting, allowing it to be just as it is. Just touching into the silence. Just pausing, relaxing, opening. Noticing how it is in this moment. This body, sitting, breathing. Establishing mindfulness internally. This body, sitting, breathing. Allowing the awareness to travel out through the body on the in-breath, to fill the body with mindfulness. Moving right out to the skin. So the whole body, sitting, breathing. Allowing the mindfulness to extend beyond the body to what's external. The sound of this voice arising and passing. Maybe sounds where you are. Sound of traffic. Sound of the wind. Sound of people, perhaps. Simply noticing this is how it is in this moment. Touching perhaps into the silence, the space between sounds, the space between words. Pausing, relaxing, opening. Opening to both the external and the internal. This body sitting, feeling, hearing. This is what's present in this moment. Just finding ease. As mindfulness establishes itself internal and external both, opening to the spaciousness. We'll take a few minutes of silence. Perhaps a couple more deep breaths. Just feeling the expansion of the body on the in-breath. The release, relaxation on the out-breath. And very gently, in your own time, allow the eyes to open. Just to look around you, to touch the faces of people here in the hall and people out there on the screen. Just that moment of contact, moment of connection, maybe a smile. Notice what that feels like. And pausing, relaxing, opening. So welcome. I'll just begin with giving you a brief overview of what we're going to be doing tonight and tomorrow. So tonight we'll be doing an introduction to all of the guidelines. I'll be doing another guided meditation through all of the guidelines to give those who haven't done Insight Dialogue before some idea of what the guidelines are about. And just to refresh us all on the guidelines, just to get a feel for them. We'll be doing some insight dialogue practice. We'll do one dyad session towards the end. But I'm going to begin with some talking. I apologize for that, but talking happens. Teachers like to talk, so. And I'm going to begin, as most retreats begin, with the precepts. And I'm going to begin with the precepts as they apply to insight dialogue, both in the hall here, where we're sat together with people face to face, an unusual experience for a lot of us after almost 3 years of living on Zoom. And also for those of you out there in Zoom land. Beginning with the practice of non-harming. Really to be mindful, to be really careful in insight dialogue practice, to be aware of both your own experience and that of your partner. And if your partner starts to get into difficulty, really allowing some space, allowing the compassion to come up, not plowing on with what you were going to say, really taking a pause and coming into that place of metta, karuna, really allowing the compassion to be present. That role of the partner in supporting the other, really important. In insight dialogue, when we're on Zoom in the real world, or even here in the meditation hall, the practice of not taking what's given freely or stealing really applies to that precious commodity of time and space. Really to pay attention when you're in dyad practice, when you're in dialogue, to pause, to notice how much you're speaking, to share that space with your partner. We're limited in the amount of time that we have for practice, so it's very precious. And practice speaking wisely, non-harmfully, gently, not harshly. All those guidelines around right speech. This is a dialogic practice, so speech is incredibly important. Again, really being open and aware of the effect of your words on your partner. If you notice, again, your partner's getting upset, just noticing. Sexual misconduct, the avoiding of sexual misconduct. Again, this is a relational practice. So really taking care, not passing comment on a person's appearance, not using humor in a way that could be taken as sexually inappropriate. And intoxication. Intoxication over the last 3 years on Zoom has been email notices, messages coming through, our intoxication with the technology. So for those online, really if an email comes in, yeah, it'll still be there when you finish practice. If a message comes in, if the telephone rings, if you can put your machine into mute or airplane mode, then do so. But if not, just ignore those distractions. So I'll say a few words about insight dialogue, and then we'll have the guided meditation. And then when we finish the guided meditation, I'll say some words on the topic of this retreat, of the death and the deathless. So for those of you who are familiar with insight dialogue, you will know the guidelines by heart, I'm sure. And the 3 bases, perhaps. The insight dialogue is founded on 3 bases. The base of meditation, of mindfulness. The base of wisdom, insight. And the base of relationality. So those are the 3 pillars that support this practice. And then we have the 6 guidelines. We have pause. That simple, momentary pause, that interrupting the story, interrupting the flow of thought, that pausing from whatever activity you're involved in for a moment to allow mindfulness to be present. And pausing is one, I think, of the most powerful guidelines. It's certainly one that people really connect with very quickly if it's their first time doing insight dialogue. I can pause. Comes as a surprise to many people that you can actually pause, that you can actually be mindful in that moment of pause, investigating what's present. This is what it's like in this moment. And the second guideline, relax. When we pause, we perhaps notice tightness, tension, allowing the body, allowing the mind to relax, bringing some ease to the body, bringing some ease to the mind, allowing some space to be present. And when we allow that space to be present, then the awareness can be opened into that space. That pause, relax, open. I'm here, I'm mindful. I'm reaching out to touch ease. I'm allowing spaciousness to be present. I'm opening to all the senses. I'm opening internal, I'm opening external, and I'm opening internal and external both. Now, these first three guidelines are the way into establishing that meditative state where we can be open to what arises and what passes, that place of emergent consciousness. That fourth guideline, attuning to emergence, noticing what's present, noticing its arising, its passing, the breath coming and going, sounds coming and going, thoughts arising and passing, feelings arising and passing. Pausing, relaxing, opening, attuning to emergence, we're now settling into that meditative state. We're opening to our partners, to that factor of relationality. Not something we can do when we're sat on a cushion with our eyes closed in a silent retreat. Really opening to the partner, noticing the arising and passing of facial expressions, sounds, movement of the partner. This is the beginning of listening deeply. When the partner is sharing, listening to the words with the ears, noticing the words, noticing the meaning of the words, coming a little bit deeper, noticing the musicality, the volume, the pitch, the timbre, that whole experience of listening to sound. And coming below that level of sound, noticing the felt experience in the body, maybe the vibrations in the chest, as the sound vibrates in the body. Noticing the felt experience that the meaning of the words conjures up in this body, in this mind. Coming deeper still. Listening to what can't be described, those felt experiences, those feelings for what is being shared, the body language, and beyond that, the simple magic of connection. And when it's our turn to speak, speaking the truth. Not some absolute truth that really doesn't exist. Simply the truth of what's present in this moment, in this mind, in this body. What is arising, what we can say truthfully is present in this moment. Watching it change, perhaps, even as we speak, that experience arises and passes, maybe gone in a moment, replaced by another experience. Pausing, relaxing, opening, listening deeply, tuning to emergence, listening deeply, speaking the truth. 6 really simple guidelines. So, taking a deep breath. So let's settle into our seats, onto our cushions again. And we'll experience these guidelines with our eyes closed. Settling in the weight of the body on the cushion. Feeling that connection between the body and the earth. Pausing. Taking a couple of deep breaths. Allowing the mindfulness time to establish itself in that connection of body and earth. Mindful of the support of the body. Pausing any thoughts. Allowing them to arise and pass. Allowing mindfulness to establish itself. Opening to investigation. What's present in this moment? Just touching into the body, breathing. The breath, the rising and passing. This body sitting. Awareness directed internally. Where we notice tightness or tension. Just opening to the second guideline, relax. Where relaxation is possible in the moment, where we can release the tightness of our hands, soften the face, allow the shoulders to drop. Just simply relaxing. Where relaxation is more difficult or impossible, paying attention, investigating what it feels like, allowing the awareness to rest on that tightness, on that tension. Investigating whether there's any change as the mindfulness rests at that point. Maybe just checking into the energy. Noticing whether the energy is high or low, dull or alert. Simply noticing what's present in this moment. Just opening the awareness. Expanding the awareness throughout the body. Being aware of the breath, being aware of the point of contact between body and earth, being aware of other bodily sensations. That opening of the awareness, that wide open awareness, opening to what's present in the mind. Open to what's present beyond this body. Open to the sound of this voice, other sounds, other experiences. Pausing, relaxing, opening. Opening to the internal and the external both. Those bodily sensations, those experiences of the mind, the sounds arising and passing. Attuning to that arising and passing, attuning to the emergence of experience. Attuning to the passing of experience. Pausing, relaxing, opening, attuning to emergence. This is what's present in this moment and this moment and this moment. We're just taking a couple of minutes to practice with those first 4 guidelines. Pause, relax, open, attuning to emergence. Pausing, relaxing, opening, attuning to emergence, listening deeply, listening to these words, noticing the meaning of these words, noticing the sound of this voice, noticing its loudness, its softness, its pitch, its timbre, its musicality. Noticing the space between words. Opening to how these words are felt in the body. How's the sound of this voice felt in the body? Are there vibrations? Some felt experience in the chest. as the sound resonates. Where do the words land in the body? Just that experience of words coming in through the ears, being felt in the body, landing in the body, changing the experience moment by moment by moment. Pausing, relaxing, opening, attuning to emergence, listening with the whole body. What is true for you in this moment? What is your truth in this moment, and this moment, and this moment? Would you be able to simply share it? Turn that experience into words and share it with your partner. In this moment, I feel this. And in this moment, this is what's true for me. And in this moment, it changes. And now this is true for me. Pausing, relaxing, opening, attuning to emergence, listening deeply, speaking the truth. Six simple guidelines: pausing, relaxing, opening, attuning to emergence, listening deeply, speaking the truth. So perhaps just settling back into your seats. As we have a 2-hour session tonight, and as 2 hours is maybe a little bit on the long side, I think perhaps we'll take a 10-minute body care break at this point. So just settling into our seats again. So I'm going to talk a little bit first about where this course came from, where this retreat came from. I think this is probably about the 5th time I'm offering it. Well, the other times have been online, so this is the first time I'm offering it face to face and online. My wife, Annie, died last year, and she chose to have a medically assisted death. She'd been ill for many years. She had chronic pain. She had gradually lost bodily function to a point where she was confined to her bed mostly. And it was very close to being confined to her bed completely. In pain, and having to be handled in bed with that pain was too much. And so she chose a medically assisted death. And I'm not advocating for medically assisted dying at all here. It's simply what happened. It was a moment that we both knew for a long time was going to happen. And neither of us had any fear of death. We talked about it frequently. And when the medically assisted dying legislation was passed in Canada, it was a relief. She applied for the program, was turned down the first time, which was really hard, and then applied a year later and was accepted. And the moment she was accepted into the program, the moment the doctor said, yes, you've been accepted, two things happened. The first one was that her pain got worse. And the second was that she had far more energy than she had had in years previously. And in that moment of acceptance, death wasn't present. So for both of us, it was kind of, poof, that's so we can get on with it. And we had 2 months. And those 2 months were perhaps the most profound 2 months of our lives. And I say our lives because for both of us, it was I wouldn't say it was a surprise, but it's hard to put words to it. It was as though all the anxiousness, the struggle of the past 27 years had been set aside. And Annie found the energy to do things. She had that need to do things. We'll go through old photographs, she said, and mail them off to friends. And Annie had thousands of photographs, boxes of them. And so we spent hours going through these photographs, Annie telling me stories about them, photographs from her childhood, photographs from her youth. She was a 60s child, so there were lots of stories. And we'd put the photographs aside envelopes to send off to various people. And as she would be putting a photograph into an envelope, she'd say, "Oh, no, I can't send that one. He wouldn't like it." And she'd tear it up, you know, and then tell me the story of why. So lots of joy in doing that. She got to talk to people. People got to share how they felt about her, what a support she'd been for them in their lives. She said it's like having a memorial service. You know, before I check out, this is great. She got to pick all the things she wanted to give to various people, all those small things. Again, into envelopes and boxes, and another trip for me down to the UPS store or the post office. After about a month of this, I was wondering who was going to check out first. Annie, in her illness, when people are bedridden, they tend to time shift. So Annie would wake up at midday or 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and then would go on through into the early hours of the morning. I would usually go to bed around 10:30, 11 o'clock and get up at 7 o'clock. But with all this extra energy that she had, she was waking up much earlier and wanting to work much later. So my hours of sleep were diminishing. But she noticed this and would say, "Time to go to bed," and send me off to bed at a reasonable hour. And in that process of that time before her death, and we had the date, we knew the date, we knew the hour. I was wheeling her back from the bathroom, and she looked at me and she said, "You know, death is really ordinary." And it was. It was just, it had become so ordinary. And in the last 36 hours of her life, she woke up in the morning of the full day, for the last full day, very early in the morning, about 8 o'clock in the morning, without any pain, with lots of energy. She had breakfast and said, "I'd like to go and sit on the porch." It was a beautiful fall day. And so we got her downstairs for the first time in months and spent the day sitting on the deck. We had lunch out there, just reading poetry, talking, laughing. And in the late afternoon, she came in and went up to bed. We had supper. And we sat and watched the harvest moon. She'd chosen that date because it was the solstice and the harvest moon kind of together there. And that was, she'd been born at Easter, so that autumn solstice was an important place for her, an appropriate time. And she woke up the next morning and had breakfast, still without pain, not quite so much energy. And she went to lie in my bed while I got her bedroom ready for the process, for the procedure, sort of moving furniture out of the way so that the doctor could get in, getting the room set up. As I'm shifting stuff, moving stuff, I happen to go into the bathroom and open the vanity drawer. And in the vanity drawer is a note. Annie would communicate to me often by notes because I would forget things. So she would write them down and leave me notes. And this note said, "Don't forget the bleach." The bleach was a challenge. Annie was very sensitive, had a very sensitive nose, and she could smell the mold in the drains. And when it got too bad, she'd tell me to put bleach in the drains. But she suffered from asthma. And I could never get the bleach into the drain at the right time. Even if I got up at 3 o'clock in the morning to do it, it is still with the wrong time. She'd still go in there and complain about the bleach. And then the doctor arrived, the nurse arrived, and she was set up. And I'm sitting by the bed holding her hand. And the doctor asked her if she was still wanted to die. And she said, without any hesitation, yes. And the process began. And her last words were, "I love you. Don't forget the bleach." Yeah. And it was peaceful. It took about 20 minutes for the doctor to pronounce her dead. Now, holding her hand, she was still there. And that experience of her dying, I could see all the troubles that she'd had falling away, quite literally. All the struggles she'd had in her life with relationships with her mother, relationships with other difficult people, just watching them fall away. And I must have sat there for perhaps hour, longer than an hour and a half. And somebody called from downstairs, asked me a question, and I turned away for a moment. And when I turned back, she was gone. And there was no doubt about it at all. There was that moment when she'd been present and the moment when she had left her body. But in all that time, there was no loss of connection. There was still that connection between us. And even now, sitting here, I can feel that connection just as strong. And before she died, Annie said, "You have to go out and teach this, share this with people." So this is where the course, the retreat, is coming from that experience. Because all the experiences that I've described here are described in the suttas, every one of them. So that's one of the women in my life who taught me about death. The other person who taught me about death was my grandmother when I was a small child. and I was having an existential crisis. And I asked my grandmother, who would tell me anything, where do we go when we die? Where are you going to go when you die, Grandma? And she said, well, they dig a big hole. I wasn't expecting that. I was, expecting the heaven and hell bit. I was pretty sure I was going to hell. At least that's what my mother told me frequently. So the big hole was the surprise. And I said, okay, what happens then? And she said, well, then they put you in the hole and they shovel all the dirt on top of you. And I knew about funerals. Funerals were something that was known. So I said, yeah, okay, that's fair enough. You get buried. Okay. Then what happens? And she said, then the worms come and eat you up. And I was sitting on my grandmother's lap and she did worms eating me up. So when we'd stop laughing, I said, and then what? And she said, and then the worms poop. And that was my first great insight. Just the joy of a small boy turning into worm poop. What else is there for it? It was great. I knew about worms. One of my jobs as a small boy was to go around picking the worms off the yard and putting them when it rained, and putting them in my mother's garden so they'd fertilize the garden. So I knew all about worms fertilizing the garden. And I thought, what a lovely way to go. I still do. And I grew up without a fear of death. My grandmother and I was our favorite conversation, usually laughing about it. My grandmother was a big woman, and the thought of somebody having to get my grandmother's body in a coffin down the narrow stairs was very amusing to both of us. And we're going to turn in this retreat to two other women who lived 2,600 years ago, Kisa Gautami and Patachara. Both have suttas or poems in the Therigatha. So we'll be working with those. We'll be looking at death. We'll be looking at the teachings on death. We'll be looking at the whole of a life. I don't know how many silent retreats I've done on old age, sickness, and death. It seemed that, every third retreat we'd have another topic and then go back to old age, sickness, and death. But everybody forgets about birth. And in the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, birth is dukkha, old age is dukkha, sickness is dukkha, death is dukkha. So we kind of forget about birth. Birth is important. So we'll be touching that whole span of life and the whole span beyond life. So this evening, we're going to be talking about about death. We're going to be practicing with our felt experiences around death, around our own death and around the death of those that are perhaps close to us, the death of others. So we'll begin with Kisa Gautami. Kisa Gautami had a child, and that child died. And she was so stricken with grief that she carried this dead child around and went to all her neighbors and said, "Do you have a cure that can bring my child back to life?" And of course, everybody said no. And eventually, somebody said, "Well, perhaps you should go and see the Buddha." So she took this dead child and went to see the Buddha, and he said, "Yeah, I can help you. I want you to go back to your village and bring me one mustard seed from each family that hasn't experienced death." And of course, she went back to the village and went round to all her neighbors and asked them for a mustard seed, asked them if they had experienced death. And if they hadn't, if they could give her a mustard seed. And of course, everybody said, yeah, we've all experienced death. And in the sutta, she realizes that, death happens to everyone. And so was able to bury her child and move on. She became a nun, an arahant, and a teacher. And her stories are in the Therigatha. I'd like to take that a little bit deeper. That metaphor of the dead child. We all perhaps carry that dead child around with us. When we start to grow old and look back and think, oh, I wish I was 10 years younger. So we're carrying that dead child around. If we look in the Satipatthana Sutta, 4 foundations of mindfulness, the 9 cemetery contemplations, where the bhikkhus and bhikkhunis would go and sit and meditate in the cemetery, in the charnel ground, where the bodies were on the surface, and just watch the bodies transform from whole bodies into worm poop. They would meditate on the bodily changes in their own bodies, knowing that that destination was there. They would make death ordinary. This is what happens. Our bodies come with a best before date, and eventually they're going to be no longer able to support us and are going to die. So in this first practice of insight dialogue, we're practicing with the pause. This is what we're going to be investigating. Our experiences, our felt experiences around death, our death or the death of another. What does it feel like in the body? Really to come down out of the mind, out of those stories, and into the felt experience. Perhaps that tightening, that tension, and investigating that tightness and tension, that pausing, relaxing, opening around it, releasing our attachment to the story of dying and just touching into that felt experience in the body, whatever it is, wherever it is, and sharing it with our partner. This is what it feels like in this moment. Investigating it from a place of mindfulness, a place of compassion, a place of metta, of friendliness. Each of us supporting the other in that investigation. And death is a topic that will bring up strong emotions. So really, really, really creating a safe space, a safe relational space to practice in is important. And this is absolutely central to insight dialogue. So we have some guidelines around that. So we ask that while you're sharing that you don't ask questions. That you don't turn the dialogue into story, into chatter, really to be present to the moment, to simply receive what is being heard, and to speak what is being felt. When people touch these difficult places, those of you who are psychotherapists will be inclined to offer advice. And so I'm requesting that you don't offer advice. It's quite difficult. It's quite difficult for anybody not to offer advice, but don't offer advice. It's important part of this practice that we can feel our emotions in their totality, that we can feel around them, that we can open to them, that we can perhaps give them space, that we can perhaps move through them, beyond them, and find what lies beyond them. When we offer advice, there's a tendency to listen to the advice and not to go deep. So by not offering advice, not offering that support, not offering comfort even in a verbal sense, we can go below that level of emotion. The opportunity is there. We may not do it. If somebody is in distress, then just raise your hand and I can come over and perhaps help you out. And if you're online, you can ask for help. So really to create that safe space remembering the precepts. It's easy for me here because I can see people, I can hear people, I can feel what's happening. Unfortunately, Zoom doesn't allow me to sneak into Zoom rooms to do the same thing. So those of you online, really to take care of each other, just to support each other in that simple, mindful presence. And in 27 years of, I say caregiver, in that role that we're assigned of caregiver, the biggest support, without any doubt, is simple, mindful presence. 95%, 99% of caregiving is simply being present to the person who's sick. I hesitate over naming that role of caregiver because caregiving is a mutual process. It's a mutual support. Even up to dying. Annie's last few days were supporting me. And allowing her to support me allowed me to support her and her to support herself. So really bringing that mutual support into the dyads, whether you're online or in person here in the hall. So we'll begin by choosing our partners. Jean, over. Someone online has a question. Okay, let me set up the contemplation first, and then I'll take questions. So the people in the hall are going to find a partner. You just stand up and find someone you're going to partner with. Try not to make it a friend, somebody that you know, maybe somebody you haven't met before, and set up chairs, cushions, whatever you like, facing each other somewhere in the hall. There's lots of space. Some of these chairs are tied together, but the ones over by the wall are free, so you can find free chairs and just set yourselves up so you're facing each other. So just settle together with your partner, just in silence for the moment. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to choose who's going to speak first. Now, people online won't be in a Zoom room yet, so just bear with me. When you go into the Zoom room, you're going to pick who speaks first. But you're not going to go into a Zoom room just yet. So we're going to start with 5 minutes, speaker listener. The speaker is going to share their felt experiences around death. When I think of death for myself, it feels like this. Very simple. When I feel like death for myself, it feels like this. When I feel the death of another, it feels like this. So you have 5 minutes each to explore that. I'll be ringing a bell online. Jean will be sending a broadcast message when you're changing partners. So there was a question on, and then after the 5 minutes sharing separate speaker listener, then we're going to go into open dialogue. And in open dialogue, we just take turns sharing. Same topic, felt experience of our own death and the death of another. And so just sitting together, just allowing the eyes to close. And pausing, relaxing, opening. So really paying attention to the pause when you've shared, speaker, when you've shared, just take a pause and then move on to the next felt experience, the next sharing. So 5 minutes, first speaker. What is the felt experience of death for myself and death for another? Just pausing, relaxing, opening, just allowing the silence to come. So now we're going to be moving into open dialogue. Just sharing our felt experience in the moment on the death of ourselves or another, and just taking turns, really using the pause to allow the mind to settle on that experience and then to speak it. We'll just have a few minutes. Just pausing, relaxing, opening. Just taking a moment to offer gratitude to your partner, perhaps for their support, for their presence in this contemplation, and then returning to your seats. So we're just coming up to the end of our time for this evening. So we'll be here tomorrow. So we'll get more time to share, more time to practice. So just settling into our seats, just feeling the weight of the body on the cushion. Just looking at the faces on the screen, the faces in the room. Offering gratitude to all those present here and online for their support, for their practice. And offering gratitude for all beings that support our life, that support our deaths. And wishing for all beings that they too might have the support of friends, of family, of partners. For all beings, may they find ease and comfort. And for all beings, may there be peace. May there be peace. May there be peace. Thank you all for your practice. Sleep well. We'll see you tomorrow. And then just settle.